The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the small, cluttered garage at the edge of town. The air smelled of oil and metal, mixed with the faint sweetness of blooming wildflowers from the overgrown lot next door. Jack knelt beside a beat 2 '97 Chevy, his hands blackened with grease, a wrench gripped tightly as he wrestled with a stubborn bolt. His faded blue work shirt clung to his broad shoulders, damp with sweat from the late summer heat. The radio on the workbench crackled, playing an old country tune, its twang barely audible over the clink of tools and Jack's occasional muttered curses. He was a man of few words, his life etched in the lines on his fascia, lines that told of long hours, sleepless nights, and the weight of raising his daughter, Lily, alone. At 8 years old, Lily was a whirlwind of energy, all pigtails and freckles, with eyes that sparkled like the lake on a clear morning. She was his world, the reason he dragged himself out of bed each day, even when the bills piled up and the garage jobs barely covered them. Her mother, Claire, had left when Lily was barely 2, chasing dreams that didn't include a small-town mechanic or a toddler. Jack didn't talk about it, and Lily didn't ask, not yet, anyway, but he saw the questions in her eyes sometimes, when she'd catch him staring at the old photo of the three of them tucked in the corner of the living room. The garage was their sanctuary, a place where Jack could fix things, make them right, unlike the parts of his life that felt irreparably broken. Lily loved it too, always scampering around, handing him tools or doodling on scraps of paper with crayons while he worked. Today, though, she was out back, playing in the makeshift Ford they'd built from old crates and a tarp. He could hear her laughter, bright and carefree, drifting through the open door. It was the sound that kept him going, a reminder that not everything was heavy. Jack tightened the bolt, his knuckles widening as he gave it one last turn. The Chevy's engine was a mess, but he was close to getting it running again. The owner, Mrs. Hargrove, needed it for her weekly trips to the market, and Jack wasn't about to let her down. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of grease, and reached for a rag. That's when he heard Ida Lily's voice, sharp and urgent, cutting through the hum of the radio. "Dad!" Her cry hit him like a jolt, the wrench slipping from his hand and clattering against the concrete floor. His heart kicked into overdrive, a primal instinct kicking in. Lily never shouted like that unless something was wrong. He scrambled to his feet, banging his knee against the car's fender, and spun toward the sound. She was running toward him from the back lot, her small figure a blur in the fading light, pigtails bouncing wildly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something he couldn't quite read, a fear, excitement, or both. "Dad!" she called again, her voice high and breathless as she skidded to a stop just outside the garage. Her sneakers were caked with dirt, and her hands clutched something small, hidden in her fist. Jack's pulse raced as he scanned her for injuries, his mind already spinning through worst-case scenarios. A snake bite, a fall, some kid from the neighborhood picking a fight. "Lily, what's wrong? You okay?" His voice was gruff, laced with worry as he dropped to one knee to meet her at eye level. His hands hovered over her shoulders, not quite touching, as if afraid he'd break her if he held too tight. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, but a grin broke across her face, bright and unexpected. "I found something," she said, her voice trembling with excitement now, not fear. She opened her hand, revealing a small, tarnished key, its edges worn smooth. It looked old, like something that had been lost for years, maybe decades. It was in the dirt by the fort. I was digging, and there it was, just sitting there like it was waiting for me. Jack's shoulders sagged with relief, the tension draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. He let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his dark, sweat-damp hair. "You scared the life out of me, kiddo. Thought you were hurt or something." He took the key from her, turning it over in his calloused fingers. It was heavier than it looked, with an intricate design etched into the boa swirling pattern that caught the light. "Where'd you say you found this?" "By the fort, under that big rock we couldn't move last week," Lily said, bouncing on her toe. "I was pretending I was an explorer, like in that movie we watched, and I started digging, and bam, there it was." "Do you think it's magic, Dad? Like it opens a secret treasure or a hidden door?" Jack chuckled, the sound low and warm. Lily's imagination was always running wild, turning their quiet life into adventures full of pirates and dragons. He wanted to keep it that way, to protect that spark in her, even if the world sometimes felt too harsh for it. Magic, huh? I don't know about that, but it's definitely old. Could belong to something important. He glanced at the key again, his brow furrowing. The design was unusual, not like any car key or house key he'd ever seen. It felt a broken bar significant, though he couldn't say why. Can we find out what it opens? Lily asked, her eyes shining with hope. Please, Dad. It's like a mystery. We have to solve it. Jack hesitated. The Chevy wasn't done, and he had a carburetor rebuild waiting for tomorrow. But Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and the truth was, he didn't have it in him to say no to her, not when she looked at him like he could fix anything, like he was her hero. All right, kiddo, he said, standing and brushing his hands on his jeans. Let's see what we can figure out, but first, you're washing the dirt off your hands. You look like you've been digging to China. Lily giggled, darting to the sink in the corner of the garage. As she scrubbed her hands, Jack studied the key, his thumb tracing the etched pattern. Something about it nagged at him, like a memory he couldn't quite grasp. He'd grown up in this town, worked in this garage since he was a teenager, taking it over when his dad passed. If anyone had lost something like this, he'd have heard about it. Wouldn't he? Lily bounded back, her hands still damp. Okay, I'm ready. Where do we start? Jack pocketed the key, glancing at the Chevy. Work could wait a little longer. Let's check the lot first, he said. Maybe there's something else out there where you found it. They stepped into the fading light, the air cooling as the sun dipped below the horizon. The backlot was a tangle of weeds and old junk, a rusted hubcaps, a broken bicycle, the remnants of a life lived on the fringes. The fort sat near the edge, a rickety structure that Jack had helped Lily build one rainy afternoon when the garage was slow. She led him to the spot, pointing at a flat, heavy stone half buried in the dirt. Right there, she said, kneeling and brushing away loose soil. It was just under the edge, like someone hid it. Jack crouched beside her, his eyes scanning the ground. The stone was weathered, but it didn't look like it had been moved in years. He grabbed a nearby stick and poked at the dirt, half expecting to find nothing but more rocks. Instead, the stick hit something solid, a faint metallic clink echoing in the quiet. Lily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Dad, what's that? He dug carefully, using his hands now, the dirt cool and damp under his fingers. A few inches down, he uncovered a small, rusted box, no bigger than a cigar case. Its surface was pitted with age, but the same swirling pattern from the key was etched into the lid. Lily's eyes went wide, her breath hitching. Is that a broken bar, a treasure box? She whispered, as if saying it too loud might make it disappear. Jack's heart thudded, not from excitement but from a sudden, inexplicable unease. He'd lived here his whole life, walked this lot 1,000 times. How had he never seen this before? Maybe, he said, keeping his voice steady for her sake. Let's take it inside and see if that key fits. They carried the box back to the garage, Lily practically vibrating with anticipation. Jack set it on the workbench, the radio now silent, the only sound the faint hum of crickets outside. He pulled the key from his pocket, its weight heavy in his hand. Lily leaned in close, her breath warm against his arm. Ready? He asked, meeting her eyes. She nodded, her grin infectious despite the strange knot in his gut. He slid the key into the lock, half expecting it to jam, but it turned smoothly, the mechanism clicking with a precision that belied the box's age. The lid popped open, revealing a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle, nestled inside. No gold, no jewels, just a single sheet, its edges curling like it had been waiting a long time to be found. Lily's face fell slightly, but her curiosity didn't waver. What's it say, Dad? Jack unfolded the paper, careful not to tear it. The handwriting was elegant, faded but legible, written in black ink. His eyes scanned the first line, and his breath caught. To my dearest Jack. His hands trembled, the paper crinkling slightly. The words blurred as his mind raced. This wasn't possible. He hadn't been called dearest by anyone since Claire, and even then, she'd never written him letters. He forced himself to read on, his voice barely a whisper. If you're reading this, you've found the key I left for you. I'm sorry for the years of silence, for the pain I caused. There are things I couldn't tell you, not then, but you deserve the truth, and Lily deserves to know her mother." Lily's small hand touched his arm. "Dad, what's wrong?" He couldn't answer. Not yet. The letter was from Clary, her handwriting, her voice, preserved in ink. But how? Why? And why here, buried in the dirt of a place he'd called home for years? His eyes flicked to the next line, and his heart stopped. "There's a secret in this town, Jack, something I discovered before I left. It's why I had to go, why I couldn't stay. But I never stopped loving you, or our little girl." The words swam, and he felt Lily's gaze on him, waiting for answers he didn't have. He folded the letter, tucking it back into the box. "We'll read it later," he said, his voice rough. "It's getting late, kiddo." "But Dada." "Later," he said, sharper than he meant. Her face fell, and he hated himself for it. He softened, pulling her into a hug. "We'll figure it out, I promise." "Just a broken bar, give me a minute, okay?" She nodded against his chest, and he held her tight, the key still clutched in his hand. Outside, the crickets sang, but the air felt heavier now, charged with questions that had no easy answers. What secret had Claire uncovered, and what did it mean for him and Lily now? Lily was asleep in the back seat of the pickup, her head resting on a folded jacket, when Jack pulled up to the house. The box sat on the passenger seat, the letter inside burning a hole in his thoughts. He carried Lily inside, tucking her into bed, her small hand still clutching a crayon she'd been doodling with earlier. He kissed her forehead, lingering a moment, then returned to the kitchen. The letter lay open on the table, its words staring up at him. Claire's words. He poured a glass of whiskey, the bottle a rare indulgence, and sat down, reading it again. "There's a place under the old oak by the river, where the roots twist into the ground. Dig there, Jack. You'll find what I couldn't face. Be careful. They're watching." His jaw tightened. The oak by the river was a local landmark, a gnarled giant older than the town itself. He and Claire used to sit under it, back when they were young and thought love could fix anything. But they? Who was she talking about? And why had she hidden this, leaving him and Lily to stumble across it years later? He didn't sleep that night, the letter's weight keeping him awake. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He'd go to the oak, see what Claire had left behind. For Lily's sake, he had to know. He woke her early, promising an adventure. Her eyes lit up, the disappointment from last night forgotten. They drove to the river, the box and key in his pocket. The oak loomed ahead, its branches casting long shadows. Jack grabbed a shovel from the truck, his heart pounding as Lily ran ahead, oblivious to the storm brewing in his chest. "Over here, Dad," she called, pointing to the roots. He started digging, the earth soft and yielding. Minutes passed, then an hour, until the shovel hit something hard, a metal chest, larger than the box from the garage, its surface etched with the same swirling pattern. Lily gasped, but Jack's blood ran cold. He pried it open, revealing a collection of papers, photographs, and a small, leather-bound journal. The photos showed people he recognized as town council members, the sheriff, even old Mrs. Hargrove via meeting in secret, their faces grim. The journal was Claire's, detailing a conspiracy, illegal land deals, a hidden fund, and a name that kept appearing at the order. "Dad, what is it?" Lily asked, her voice small. He closed the chest, his hands shaking. "Something your mom left for us," he said, forcing a smile. A puzzle we'll solve together. But as they drove home, the rear-view mirror showed a black SUV trailing them, its windows tinted. Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. Claire's warning echoed in his mind. They're watching. He didn't know who they were, but he knew one thing. He'd protect Lily, no matter what it took. The truth was out there, buried in the dirt of their quiet town, and he'd find Ida for her, for Claire, for the life they'd lost. The sun was dipping low, painting the garage in hues of amber and shadow as Jack hunched over the engine of a battered A92 Ford pickup. His hands, stained with grease and calloused from years of wrenching, moved with practiced precision, tightening a bolt while the faint hum of a classic rock song crackled from the radio on the workbench. The garage smelled of motor oil and metal, a comforting mix for Jack, who'd spent more hours here than he could count. It was his domain, a place where he could fix what was broken, unlike the pieces of his life that still felt jagged and misaligned. At 35, he was a single dad, his world orbiting around his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, who was out back playing in the yard, her laughter a bright counterpoint to the clank of his tools. Sophie was a spark of light in his often heavy days, her blonde curls bouncing, her green eyes wide with wonder, always asking questions or spinning stories about knights and dragons. Her mother, Emily, had left when Sophie was just a baby, chasing a life that didn't include a small-town mechanic or the responsibilities of parenthood. Jack didn't talk about her, and Sophie rarely asked, but he saw the curiosity in her eyes sometimes, especially when she'd find an old photo in a drawer, Emily's face frozen in a smile that hadn't lasted. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the Ford's carburetor. The truck belonged to Mr. Jenkins, a regular who needed it running by tomorrow for a delivery run. Jack couldn't afford to lose a customer, not with bills stacking up like a bad hand of cards. The clatter of a dropped wrench broke his focus, but it was Sophie's voice that snapped his head up. "Dad!" she shouted, her tone sharp and urgent, slicing through the music. His heart lurched, the wrench forgotten as it hit the concrete floor. Sophie's voice wasn't playful, it carried a tremor that set his nerves on edge. He straightened, banging his elbow on the hood, and spun toward the open garage door. She was running toward him from the backyard, her small figure a blur in the fading light, her sneakers kicking up dust. Her face was flushed, eyes wide, and she clutched something tightly in her fist. "Dad!" she called again, skidding to a stop just inside the garage, her breath coming in quick gasps. Jack's pulse hammered as he scanned her for injuries, his mind racing through possibilities: a fall, a stray dog, or worse. He dropped to one knee, his hands hovering over her shoulders, afraid to touch her in case she was hurt. "Sophie, what's wrong? You okay, kid?" His voice was rough, tight with worry, his eyes searching hers. She was panting, but a grin broke through her breathless expression, her eyes sparkling with something that wasn't fear and excitement, maybe, or wonder. "I found something," she said, opening her hand to reveal a small, tarnished locket, its surface etched with a delicate floral pattern. It looked old, like it had been buried for years, its chain tangled and dulled by time. "It was in the garden, Dad. I was digging by the rosebush, and it was just there, like it wanted me to find it." Jack exhaled, relief washing over him like a cool breeze. He'd braced for something serious, not another of Sophie's treasures. She was always finding things: shiny rocks, bottle caps, once even a rusted toy car, but this was different. He took the locket, turning it over in his grease-stained fingers. It was heavier than it looked, the metal cool against his skin. The clasp was stiff but intact, and the floral design seemed oddly familiar, though he couldn't place why. "You scared me half to death, Soph," he said, managing a chuckle as he ruffled her hair. "Thought you'd tangled with a raccoon or something." He held the locket up to the light, squinting at the intricate etchings. "Where exactly did you find this?" "By the rosebush, where we planted those flowers last spring," she said, bouncing on her toe. "I was pretending I was an archaeologist, like in that movie, and I dug it up." "Do you think it's from a princess, or maybe a pirate's treasure?" Jack's lips twitched into a smile. Sophie's imagination was boundless, turning their quiet life into a canvas for grand adventures. He wanted to keep it that way, to shield her from the world's sharper edges for as long as he could. "A princess, huh? I don't know about that, but it's definitely old. Might belong to someone around here." He glanced at the locket again, his thumb brushing over the clasp. It didn't look like costume jewelry, it had a weight, a craftsmanship that suggested it meant something to someone, once. "Can we open it?" Sophie asked, leaning in close, her breath warm against his arm. "Maybe there's a picture inside, or a secret message." Jack hesitated. The Ford was still in pieces, and he had a long night ahead to get it running, but Sophie's eyes were bright with hope, and he knew saying no would dim that spark, even just a little. "All right, kiddo," he said, standing and wiping his hands on the rag. "Let's see what's inside. But then it's back to work for me, and you're getting ready for bed." Sophie clapped her hands, darting to the workbench as Jack followed. He set the locket down under the fluorescent light, its surface glinting faintly. The clasp was stubborn, but with a gentle twist, it popped open, revealing a small, faded photograph tucked inside. It showed a young woman, her face soft and smiling, her eyes hauntingly familiar. Jack's breath caught, his fingers freezing on the locket. It was Emilia younger, maybe 18, her hair loose and her smile unguarded, nothing like the strained expression she'd worn the last time he saw her. "Dad, who's that?" Sophie asked, her voice curious but tentative, sensing the shift in him. Jack didn't answer right away. His mind was reeling, memories of Emily flooding back whole late nights under the stars, her laughter, the way she'd promised forever before she broke it. Why was her picture in a locket buried in their backyard? He turned the locket over, noticing a tiny engraving on the back, EJ, 2015. His chest tightened. That was the year they'd gotten married, the year before Sophie was born. "Dad?" Sophie's voice pulled him back. She was staring at him, her brow furrowed. "It's a broken bar someone I used to know," he said, his voice low, barely steady. He closed the locket, the click loud in the quiet garage. "Let's take it inside, Soph. We'll figure out what to do with it tomorrow." "But what if it's important?" She pressed, her hands on her hips, a stubborn streak he recognized as his own. "What if it's a clue to something big?" He forced a smile, tucking the locket into his pocket. "If it's a clue, we'll solve it together. But right now, it's bedtime." "Deal?" She pouted but nodded, trailing him as he locked up the garage. They walked to the small house behind it, the night air cool and thick with the scent of cut grass. Sophie chattered about pirates and hidden treasure, but Jack's mind was elsewhere, tangled in the past. The locket felt heavy in his pocket, a weight that wasn't just metal. What was Emily trying to tell him, leaving something like this behind? And why now, after all these years? Inside, he tucked Sophie into bed, her eyes already drooping as she clutched her stuffed rabbit. "We'll be detectives tomorrow, right, Dad?" She mumbled, half asleep. "You bet, kiddo," he said, kissing her forehead. But as he turned off the light, the locket burned in his pocket, and he knew sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. Jack didn't sleep. The locket sat on the kitchen table, glinting under the dim glow of a single bulb, mocking him with its secrets. He'd poured a coffee, though it was long past midnight, and stared at the engraving EJ, 2015. His mind churned, piecing together fragments of a life he'd tried to forget. Emily had left without a word, leaving only a note that said she wasn't ready for this life. He'd been angry, then heartbroken, then just tired, focusing on Sophie and the garage to keep himself sane. But this locket, buried in their garden, suggested something else, something she'd hidden, maybe even from him. He opened it again, studying the photo. Emily's smile was real, not the forced one she'd worn in their last months together. Behind her and the photo was a tree, its branches gnarled and unmistakably the old sycamore down by the creek, a place they'd spent countless evenings before life got complicated. His gut twisted. Had she buried the locket there, near the rosebush, knowing he'd find it one day, or had someone else? By morning, Sophie was up before the sun, her excitement undimmed. "Are we going on our adventure now?" she asked, bouncing into the kitchen in her pajamas, her curls a wild halo. Jack managed a tired smile, his coffee cold in his mug. "Soon, Soph. Let's eat first." He made pancakes, her favorite, trying to keep things normal while his mind raced. The locket was a puzzle, and he didn't like puzzles he couldn't solve. After breakfast, he decided they'd start at the sycamore. If Emily had left the locket as a message, the tree in the photo was the next clue. They drove to the creek, Sophie clutching the locket like a talisman, her chatter filling the truck's cab. The sycamore stood alone, its roots sprawling into the earth like ancient fingers. Jack parked, grabbing a small shovel from the truck bed. Sophie ran ahead, her sneakers sinking into the soft ground, her voice bright as she pointed out the tree. "This is it, right? The one in the picture?" she asked, kneeling by the roots. Jack nodded, his throat tight. "Looks like it." He started digging, the shovel biting into the earth, each scoop heavy with anticipation. Sophie watched, her eyes wide, as if expecting a chest of gold or a magic lamp. But Jack's instincts told him this wasn't Igami, and not for Emily, not for whoever had buried that locket. After 20 minutes, the shovel hit something solid. Jack's heart skipped, and Sophie gasped, leaning closer. He brushed away the dirt, revealing a small, rusted tin, its edges sealed with age. It was no bigger than a shoebox, its surface marked with the same floral pattern as the locket. Sophie clapped her hands, but Jack's hand shook as he pried it open, the hinges groaning. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, and a small, leather-bound notebook. The letters were in Emily's handwriting, addressed to him, dated from the months after she left. His breath hitched as he lifted the top letter, the paper brittle but intact. Sophie reached for it, but he pulled it back gently. "Not yet, Soph," he said, his voice low. "Let me read it first." Her face fell, but she nodded, sitting back on her heels. Jack opened the letter, his eyes scanning the words, each one a punch to the gut. "Jack, I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I had to protect you and Sophie. There's something in this town, something dangerous. I found out by accident, and they threatened me. I buried this where I knew you'd look, where we were happy." The notebook explains everything. "Be careful. They're still here." His hands trembled, the letter crinkling. They again. Who was she talking about? He glanced at the notebook, its pages filled with Emily's neat script: names, dates, locations. He skimmed the first page, his blood running cold. It detailed secret meetings at the old mill, payments to local officials, and something called the Circle, a group Emily claimed controlled the town's underbelly. Names he recognized jumped out at Sheriff Dawson, the mayor, even Mr. Jenkins, whose truck sat in his garage. "Dad, what's it say?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Sensing his tension, he forced a smile, closing the tin. "It's a story your mom left us," he said, keeping his tone light. "We'll figure it out together, okay?" But his mind was racing. Emily had stumbled onto something big, something that scared her enough to run. And now, years later, he and Sophie had walked into it. They drove home, the tin in the passenger seat, Sophie clutching the locket in the back. Jack's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, his stomach knotting as he noticed a dark sedan trailing them, keeping its distance but never turning off. He tightened his grip on the wheel, Emily's warning echoing, "They're still here." Back home, he locked the doors, something he rarely did in their small town. Sophie was oblivious, already spinning a tale about her mom being a secret agent. Jack let her talk, but his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the notebook's contents. It described a smuggling operation of drugs, maybe, or something worse. He run through the mill, with half the town's leaders complicit. Emily had found evidence, enough to make her a target. The last entry was dated the day she left, a single line, "I'm sorry, Jack, I'll come back when it's safe." He didn't know if she ever meant to return, but the sedan outside their house suggested they knew he'd found the tin. That night, he sat by Sophie's bed, watching her sleep, the locket on her nightstand. His hand rested on the baseball bat he kept by the door, a precaution he'd never needed before. The next morning, he called in a favor from an old friend, Pete, a mechanic who'd moved to the city but still had contacts. Pete agreed to look into the names in the notebook, promising to be discreet. Jack didn't tell him everything, just enough to get help. He kept Sophie close, taking her to the garage under the pretense of a detective day, letting her sort bolts while he watched the street. By noon, the sedan was back, parked across the road. Jack's jaw clenched as he recognized the driver, Sheriff Dawson, his face unreadable behind sunglasses. Jack's instinct was to confront him, but Emily's words held him back. "Be careful." Instead, he called Pete again, who confirmed the mill was still active, though officially abandoned. Rumors swirled about late-night deliveries, guarded by men in unmarked cars. Jack knew he couldn't stay passive. That evening, he left Sophie with Mrs. Carter, the neighbor, claiming he had a late job. He drove to the mill, the tin hidden under the truck's seat, the notebook in his pocket. The mill loomed dark against the night sky, its windows boarded, but a faint light flickered inside. He parked a quarter-mile away, moving through the woods on foot, his heart pounding. Inside, he found crates stacked high, their contents hidden under tarps. Voices echoed from a back room, a low, tense, familiar. He crept closer, peering through a crack in the wall. Sheriff Dawson was there, with Jenkins and another man Jack didn't recognize, arguing over the next shipment. Jack's phone was in his hand, recording, when a floorboard creaked under his weight. The voices stopped. Dawson's head snapped up, and Jack bolted, heart in his throat, crashing through the woods to his truck. Tires screeched behind him as he sped home, the sedan in pursuit. He lost it on a back road, his hands shaking as he gripped the wheel. When he picked up Sophie, she was asleep, the locket around her neck. Mrs. Carter mentioned a man stopping by, asking if Jack was home. Said he was a friend, she added, but Jack's blood ran cold. He thanked her, carrying Sophie to the truck, his eyes scanning the dark. Back home, he locked the doors again, the notebook and recording hidden in a safe under the floorboards. He didn't know how deep this went, but he knew one thing: Emily had left him a fight, and he'd finish it for Sophie, for the truth. The locket gleamed in the moonlight, a reminder that some secrets, once unearthed, couldn't be buried again. As he sat by Sophie's bed, the bat within reach, he heard a car engine rumble outside, then fade. They were watching, waiting. But Jack was ready.